Welcome to my channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The phone number was written in faded blue ink on the palm of my hand. 555. 7,834. I didn't remember writing it. I didn't remember much from last night's storm, actually. Just the sound of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundation of my apartment building in downtown Portland. And now, this number, smudged but still visible, like a tattoo I never asked for. If you're listening to this right now, cozy in your bed with the lights dimmed, I need you to promise me something. Promise that if you ever see an old payphone during a thunderstorm, you'll keep walking. Don't stop. Don't even look at it twice. Because some calls, they're not meant to be answered. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you why I can't sleep when it rains anymore. And now, the story begins. It started 3 weeks ago. I just moved to Portland from a small town in Nebraska, chasing a tech job and the promise of a fresh start after my divorce. The apartment was nothing special. A studio on the 4th floor of a building that had seen better days. But it was mine. And that was enough. The first thunderstorm hit on a Tuesday night. I remember because I'd just finished unpacking the last of my boxes, mostly books and old photo albums I couldn't bring myself to throw away. The rain started gentle, just a patter against the windows. Then the thunder rolled in. Living in Nebraska, you get used to storms. But Portland thunder, it's different. It echoes off the mountains, bounces between the buildings, creates this symphony of sound that makes you feel small. I was making chamomile tea when I heard it. Ring, ring, ring. At first, I thought it was my phone, but no, my cell was right there on the counter, screen dark. The landline? I didn't even have one connected yet, but the ringing continued, muffled, distant, like it was coming from outside. I moved to the window, pressing my face against the cool glass. The street below was empty except for the rivers of rain running along the gutters. The streetlights created pools of orange light, and there, on the corner of Oak and 21st, I saw it, a payphone. Now, I know what you're thinking. Payphones in 2025? They're practically extinct, but this one, it stood there like a relic from another time. The booth was intact, one of those old Superman changing room types with the folding door. And it was ringing. The sound cut through the storm like it was meant just for me. 3 rings, pause. 3 rings, pause. A pattern that made my skin crawl for reasons I couldn't explain. I watched for maybe 5 minutes. Nobody came. Nobody answered. The phone just kept ringing in that same pattern. Patient, insistent, wrong. Then the storm passed and the ringing stopped. I went to bed telling myself it was just some electrical glitch. Old phone lines picking up interference from the lightning. Nothing more. But when I woke up the next morning, that's when I found the number on my hand. 555. 7,834. I spent the next day trying to rationalize it. Maybe I'd written it down during a work call and forgotten. Maybe it was from the grocery store clerk or the cable installation guy. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. The ink was the wrong color. I only use black pens, a quirk from my accounting days. This was blue. The kind of blue you'd find in old ballpoint pens from the 70s. And the handwriting? It was mine, but different somehow, shakier, like I'd written it in the dark, or in a hurry, or both. I tried calling the number from my cell. It just rang and rang. No voicemail, no answering service. Just endless ringing that made my ear ache after a while. That evening, I walked down to the corner. The payphone stood there in the daylight looking almost embarrassed by its own existence. The receiver hung crooked in its cradle. The metal cord was kinked and twisted. When I lifted the handset, Silence. Not even a dial tone. That thing hasn't worked in years. I jumped. An elderly man stood behind me, walking a terrier that looked as old as he was. He wore a blazer's cap and a raincoat despite the clear sky. "The phone," he continued, eyeing me with curiosity. "City's supposed to remove it, but—" He shrugged. "Bureaucracy. It was ringing last night," I said. "During the storm." His expression changed then. Just for a moment. A flicker of something, recognition, fear. Then he tugged on the dog's leash. "Must have been another phone," he said, already walking away. "That one's been dead since '97. But I knew what I'd heard, and I knew he was lying. That night, I couldn't focus on anything. Work emails piled up. My Netflix queue mocked me. All I could think about was that phone, and the number on my hand that was finally starting to fade. Around midnight, I heard the first rumble of thunder. The storm came in fast. One moment, clear skies. The next, clouds so dark they turned the city into premature night. I was ready this time. I sat by my window with a cup of coffee. No way I was sleeping anyway. And waited. 11:47 p.m. The first flash of lightning. 11:48 p.m. The thunder followed. 11:49 p.m. The phone began to ring. 3 rings, pause. 3 rings, pause. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door before I could talk myself out of it. The elevator took forever. By the time I reached the lobby, my hands were shaking. Not from cold, but from something else. Anticipation, dread, both. The rain hit me like a wall when I stepped outside. Within seconds, I was soaked through. But I didn't care. I had to know. I had to understand what was happening. The payphone booth offered some shelter from the rain. I stood there, watching the receiver vibrate slightly with each ring. Up close, I could see things I'd missed before. Scratches in the metal. Numbers carved into the glass, and something else. Fingerprints on the handset, fresh ones. But nobody had been here, I was sure of it. 3 rings. Pause. 3 rings. I reached for the receiver. Hello? Static, but not just static. There was something underneath it, like voices speaking backwards, or underwater, or both. I pressed the receiver harder against my ear. Hello? Is someone there? The static cleared for just a moment, and I heard it, a voice. My voice, but different. Older, maybe, or just very, very tired. Don't answer it next time. The line went dead. I stood there in the booth, rain drumming on the glass, trying to process what I'd just heard. It was impossible. It had to be some kind of prank, but the voice, God, the voice had sounded so familiar. So much like me, but wrong. When I finally made it back to my apartment, I was shivering so hard my teeth chattered. I took a hot shower, made more coffee, tried to convince myself I'd imagined it all, but when I looked at my hand, the number was back, darker than before, and underneath it, written in that same blue ink, were 2 words, 1 week. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I called in sick to work, ordered takeout when I remembered to eat, spent hours online searching for anything about the payphone, the number, similar experiences. Nothing. Just dead ends and forum posts that led nowhere. Well, almost nothing. On the second night of my search, bleary-eyed and running on nothing but coffee and stubbornness, I found a blog post. It was buried deep in the archives of a paranormal forum. Posted in 2003 by someone calling themselves Time Slip Survivor. The post was titled, "The Phones That Ring Between Worlds." Most of it was rambling, disjointed, like the person was writing in a hurry or a panic, but certain phrases jumped out at me. Blue ink that appears without memory. 3 rings, then pause. Your own voice warning you. Time trades in the storm. The post had no comments, no likes, like it existed in its own little bubble of the internet that nobody else had found. I tried to click on the user's profile, but it led to a dead page. Everything about Time Slip Survivor had been deleted except this one post. At the bottom, they'd written, "If you're reading this, you've already answered. I'm sorry. The loop has you now. But maybe if enough of us know we can find a way out, look for others. Look for the signs. And whatever you do, don't trust the version of you that calls on a Wednesday. Wednesday, you lies." I printed out the post, needing something physical to prove I hadn't imagined it. But when I went back to find it again the next morning, the entire forum was gone, like it had never existed at all. On the fourth night, exhaustion finally won. I crashed hard, face down on my couch with my laptop still open, the printed post clutched in my hand. The storm that woke me was the worst yet. Thunder so loud it set off car alarms. Lightning that turned night into day for split seconds. And the ringing, always the ringing. This time I didn't hesitate, I ran. Down the stairs, the elevator was too slow. Out into the storm without even grabbing a jacket. I had to know, I had to understand what was happening to me. But when I reached the corner, someone was already there. A woman stood in the booth, her back to me, the receiver pressed to her ear. She wore a yellow raincoat, the hood pulled up. Her free hand pressed against the glass and I could see something written on her palm in blue ink. I approached slowly, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it over the thunder. "Miss, are you okay?" She turned, and I saw my own face staring back at me. Not similar, not resembling. My exact face, but older, lines around the eyes. Gray streaking through hair I kept religiously dyed. Me, but for maybe 10 years in the future. "I told you not to answer," she said, and her voice was the tired voice from the phone. "But you never listen. We never listen." "What? What is this?" She smiled, but it was sad. So deeply sad it made my chest ache. Every storm, the phone rings. Every storm, one of us answers. And every time we answer, we lose a piece of time. A day here, a week there, sometimes more. "That's impossible. Look at your hand." I did. The words had changed. No longer 1 week, now it read 3 days. The phone, it's a junction, a place where time gets thin, where all the versions of us can bleed through, past, present, future. Every time you answer, you trade time with another version. They get your days, you get theirs. Why would anyone... "Because sometimes," she interrupted, "the version calling has something you need to know, a warning. A piece of information that changes everything. The woman who answered before you, she told me about the job offer I'd get next month. Told me not to take it. Said the company would fold in 6 months and I'd lose everything. The rain was soaking through my clothes, but I didn't care. And did you? Not take it? I don't know yet. That's still my future. But I know I'll have the choice now. That's what the phone does. It gives us choices at a price. The time we lose." She nodded. "The man in 97, the last one who answered before the phone went dead, he used up everything. Decades of trades, decades of calls. They found him in the booth, aged 40 years overnight. That's why the city shut it down, or tried to. But it still rings. For us, yes, only for us. People who are unstuck. People who exist in multiple timelines at once. People who've already answered once and created the loop." I thought about the number on my hand, about how I couldn't remember writing it. "I've already answered, haven't I? In some other timeline?" "Thursday," she said. 3 weeks from now. You'll answer, and you'll talk to a version of yourself from 2 years ago. You'll try to warn her about the divorce. Try to tell her the signs to watch for. But she won't listen. We never do." The thunder was moving away now, the rain softening to a drizzle. I could feel the moment ending, slipping away like sand through fingers. How do I stop it? How do I get out of the loop? She was already fading, becoming translucent like a ghost. "You don't," her voice echoed as she disappeared. "But you learn to make the trades count. You learn which calls to answer and which to let ring." I stood alone in the booth, the receiver dangling from its cord. The storm was passing. Soon, the phone would stop ringing. But I knew it would ring again. Next storm, next week. Next chance to trade time for knowledge. But something else was happening. As the older version of me faded completely, I noticed something glinting in the corner of the booth. A quarter, but not just any quarter. It was dated 2047, 22 years in the future. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It was real, solid, warm, like it had just come from someone's pocket. On the back, where the eagle should have been, there was an inscription etched in tiny letters. "For the call that matters most." I pocketed the quarter and started walking back to my apartment, but something made me stop. Turn around. The payphone booth was still there, but it looked different, newer somehow. The glass was clean. The metal gleamed despite the rain, and inside, stuck to the wall with what looked like decades-old tape, was a piece of paper. I ran back and pulled open the door. The paper was a list. Names and dates written in different hands, different inks. At the top, in faded pencil, "Those who answered, 1,973 to 2,025 inches. My name wasn't on it. Not yet. But at the bottom, in fresh blue ink, someone had written, "The pattern begins again. 2025. I looked at my hand. The number was gone, but I knew I'd write it again. Somewhere. Somewhen. The loop would continue. But now I had questions. Who started this? Why 1973? Why this phone? And most importantly, who was making the list? I couldn't let it go. The list haunted me. 43 names spanning 52 years. Some crossed out, some circled, some with question marks next to them. I started with the most recent name before mine, Marcus Chen, 2019. It took me 3 days of searching, but I found him. He owned a coffee shop 6 blocks from my apartment. The kind of place with exposed brick and pour-over coffee that takes 15 minutes to make. I went in on a Thursday afternoon when it was quiet. Marcus was behind the counter, wiping down the espresso machine. Mid-40s, graying at the temples, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. When he saw me, his hand froze mid-wipe. "You found the list," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. He poured 2 coffees without asking what I wanted, gestured to a corner table. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us trying to figure out where to start. "How long?" I finally asked. 6 years. Started right after I opened this place. Storm knocked out the power, and I heard the phone ringing outside, thought someone needed help. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Guess someone did. Just happened to be me. "The trades?" "Lost my 30s, he said simply. Traded them for knowledge about my daughter's illness. Future me told me which doctor to see, which treatment would work. She's 16 now, healthy, worth every lost year. But you're still on the list. Once you answer, you're always on the list. The phone keeps ringing. You just learn to be selective about which calls you take." He leaned forward. "But you didn't come here to talk about my trades. You want to know about the others." I pulled out the list. 43 names. There has to be a connection. Marcus studied it. I found 12 of them. Most won't talk about it. Some can't. The trades took too much. But there's a pattern. What kind of pattern? Geography, for one. Every person on that list lived or worked within a 6-block radius of that phone booth. Like it has a range, a field of influence. And the other pattern? He hesitated. This is going to sound crazy. "Marcus, I've been talking to future versions of myself through a payphone. My crazy meter is broken. Fair point." He pulled out his phone, showed me a map he'd marked up. "Every person on the list, their apartment or workplace is built on the same underground water system. The old Portland tunnels from the 1900s. The ones they used to move goods from the river. You think the tunnels have something to do with it? I think something happened down there. In 1973, something that created a thin spot. A place where time doesn't work quite right. And the phone is just the focal point. The place where the effect is strongest. I thought about this, about how insane it sounded, about how much sense it made. Have you been down there? In the tunnels? Once. His face went pale. Found things I wish I hadn't. Old equipment, machines that shouldn't exist, and papers. God, the papers. Research notes about temporal displacement fields and consciousness bridging. Corporate letterhead from a company called Meridian Dynamics that supposedly never existed. What happened to them? Best I can tell, they succeeded. Whatever they were trying to do, it worked. Just not the way they planned. The field they created, it's still active, still growing, and we're the lucky ones who stumbled into it. Lucky, I repeated, thinking of the years I'd already lost. Compared to the alternative, yeah. He stood up, went behind the counter, and pulled out a manila folder. I've been collecting information for years, everything I could find about Meridian Dynamics, the experiments, the other people on the list. Take it. Maybe you'll see something I missed. I took the folder. It was heavier than I expected. Why are you helping me? Because every few years, someone new finds the list. Someone new starts asking questions. And maybe if enough of us understand what's happening, we can find a way to control it, or at least survive it better. As I turned to leave, Marcus called out, "Hey, word of advice? The storm season's just starting. The calls are going to come more frequently now. And future you, she's not always your friend. Sometimes she's desperate. Sometimes she lies. Trust your gut more than your own voice." I walked home with the folder clutched against my chest, my mind racing. 43 names. Secret experiments. Temporal displacement fields. It was too much to process. But when I got back to my apartment and opened the folder, the first thing I saw made everything else fade away. It was a photograph. Black and white. Dated June 15th, 1973. It showed a group of scientists standing in what was clearly one of the tunnels Marcus had mentioned. They were smiling, celebrating something. And in the center of the group, holding what looked like an early prototype of a cordless phone, was a woman who looked exactly like me. Not similar, not a family resemblance. Exactly like me. The sticky note attached to the photo had 2 words written in Marcus's handwriting. Patient 0. As I walked back to my apartment, I thought about what she'd said. About choices, about prices, about the versions of ourselves we could become if we just knew what was coming. The phone would ring again, and despite everything, despite the warning, I knew I'd answer, because that's who I am, who we are, people who can't resist the possibility of change, even when it costs us everything. But there was something else now, something I hadn't noticed before. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I felt it. A weight in my jacket pocket that hadn't been there before. I reached in and pulled out a small notebook. Leather-bound. Worn. The kind you'd find in an antique shop. Inside the front cover, written in handwriting that was mine, but different. For when you're ready to understand. The answers are in the questions you haven't asked yet. The pages were filled with notes, diagrams, phone numbers with dates next to them. Some in my handwriting, some in others. A record of calls made and received across who knows how many timelines. One page caught my eye, a simple drawing of the phone booth from above, with lines radiating out from it like a spider's web. Each line led to an address. 43 addresses. And at each address, a name and a date. I recognized my apartment building immediately, but there were others. The coffee shop on Morrison, the bookstore that closed last year, the old hotel that was being converted to condos, all within walking distance of the phone booth, all connected by those thin, penciled lines. At the bottom of the page, someone had written, "We're not random, we're chosen." But by what? I spent the rest of the night going through the notebook. Each page revealed more of the pattern. The calls didn't just happen during any storm, they followed a schedule, a rhythm, like something was orchestrating them. And then I found it. Near the back of the notebook, a newspaper clipping yellowed with age. The headline read, "Mysterious Power Surge Shuts Down Downtown Portland, June 15th, 1973. The article was brief, mentioning electrical anomalies, lone transformers, and several people reporting strange phone calls from nowhere. But it was the photo that made my blood run cold. A wide shot of the affected area, and there, in the corner of the frame, barely visible, the phone booth. Already there in 1973, already waiting. Someone had circled it in red ink and written, "Ground Zero. If you're still listening, still cozy in your bed while the storm passes by your window, I need you to understand something. This isn't just a story anymore. This is a warning, a map, an invitation. Because if you've made it this far, if you're still with me, then you're either very patient or you recognize something in this tale. Something that resonates. Something that feels familiar in a way you can't quite place. Check your neighborhood. Look for the old phone booths. The ones that should have been removed years ago but somehow never were. Count the blocks from your home. 6 blocks, always 6 blocks or less. And if you find one, if you discover you're within the range, then you have a choice to make. You can forget this story. Close your eyes. Drift off to sleep and pretend it was just another creepy tale to pass the time. Or you can wait for the next storm. You can listen for the ringing. You can choose to answer when your time comes. Because here's what I've learned in these past 6 months. What all of us on the list have learned. The phone doesn't ring for everyone. It chooses. It calls to those who need to know something, or those who have something others need to know. It's not random, it's not chaos, it's a network. A web of human consciousness stretched across time, connected by the simple act of answering a call. Some of us use it to warn, some to learn, some to trade away pain for years or years for wisdom. But all of us. Every single name on that list. We answered because we had to, because something in us recognized the sound. Knew it was meant for us. So I'll ask you again. And this time, really think before you answer. Have you ever heard a phone ring when no phone should be ringing? Have you ever felt time slip just for a moment, like you've lived this second before? Have you ever looked at your reflection and seen someone older or younger, looking back? Because if you have, if any of this sounds familiar, then maybe you're already one of us. Maybe your name is already on a list somewhere, waiting to be discovered. Maybe your phone is already ringing, and you just haven't learned how to hear it yet. The storm is passing now, the thunder growing distant. But it'll be back. It always comes back. And when it does, when the sky splits open and the rain falls like tears from tomorrow, listen carefully. Listen for the ringing. Listen for your future calling your name. Listen. And decide if you're brave enough to answer. Because once you do, once you pick up that receiver and hear your own voice speaking across the years, everything changes. You become unstuck, you join the network, you become part of something larger and stranger than you ever imagined. Is it worth it? I can't answer that for you. Each of us makes our own trades, pays our own prices, finds our own meaning in the static between seconds. But I can tell you this, we're waiting for you, all of us, every version of every person who ever answered the call. We're out here in the storm, connected by copper wire and desperate hope. trying to make sense of what we've become. And when you're ready, when you finally pick up that receiver with trembling hands, we'll be there. Voices in the static, ghosts in the machine. Family you haven't met yet, welcome to the junction, welcome to the loop, welcome home. Sweet dreams. And whatever you do, don't answer on the first ring. Trust me on that. The first ring is never really meant for you. It's meant for who you used to be, but the third ring, that one has your name on it. It's been 6 months since I first heard the payphone ring. 6 months of storms, of calls, of trades. I've learned so much, but every answer just brings more questions. Last week, I made a trade that cost me 3 years. 3 years of my life for a single piece of information from a version of myself who had lived through something terrible. She told me about the others, about how we're not alone, about how there's a whole network of us, people unstuck in time, people who've answered the phones. She gave me a website, said I'd only be able to access it during a thunderstorm when the boundaries are thin. Said there would be others there who understood. I waited for the next storm like a kid waits for Christmas. When it finally came, I sat at my computer with shaking hands and typed in the URL she'd given me. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered, and I was in. The form was simple. Basic HTML, like something from the early days of the internet. No fancy graphics, no ads. Just text on a dark background. The header read, "The Junction for those who answer." There were dozens of us, maybe hundreds, all sharing our stories, our experiences, our trades. I learned that payphones weren't the only conduits. Some people heard old rotary phones in antique shops. Others got calls on disconnected landlines in abandoned buildings. One woman in Japan said she'd been getting calls through a wind chime during storms for the past decade. But we all had the same experiences. The blue ink, the time trades, the versions of ourselves calling across the years. I posted my story. Within minutes, I had responses. People who'd seen my payphone, people who'd made similar trades, people who'd lost years, decades, entire lifetimes to the voices on the other end. One response stood out. The username was familiar. Time Slip Survivor. "I remember you," they wrote, or "I will remember you," or "I did remember you." Tense gets complicated when you're unstuck. You're the one who finds the pattern, aren't you? The one who figures out how to map the trades? I wrote back immediately. "What pattern? What map?" "Check your notebook, the blue one. Third drawer down. Page 47. I didn't have a blue notebook. I'd never owned a blue notebook, but something made me check anyway. And there it was, in my desk drawer. A blue moleskin I'd never seen before. I flipped to page 47. It was covered in my handwriting. Charts, graphs, timelines connecting different versions of myself. Notes about trades made and trades to come. At the top of the page, in large letters, "The pattern, do not forget again." My hands shook as I read. According to these notes, I'd been doing this for much longer than 6 months. Years. Maybe decades. But each time I figured out too much, I'd make a trade that would wipe my memory of the discovery. A safety mechanism, the note said, to keep me from going mad. But this time was different. This time, I'd left myself breadcrumbs. The notebook, the forum, the connections to others who were unstuck. I went back to the forum and found a private message from Time Slip Survivor. Tomorrow night, it read, "There's going to be a convergence, multiple storms across multiple timelines. The biggest junction opening we've ever recorded. Dozens of us are going to try something. We're going to answer our phones at exactly the same moment. Create a conference call across time itself. Maybe if enough of us connect at once, we can break the loop, or at least understand it better." "What if it makes things worse?" I typed back. "Then we trade away the memory and try again. We always do." I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to close the laptop, to pretend I'd never found the form or the notebook. to go back to simple trades and simple storms. But I knew I couldn't, because somewhere, out there, or somewhere in here, or somewhere in between, there were hundreds of versions of me who'd already made that choice, and they all led back to this moment, this decision, this chance to finally understand what we'd become. The next night, I sat by my window and waited. The storm rolled in at exactly 11:43 p.m., just like the forum had predicted. Lightning split the sky in patterns that looked almost like writing. Thunder spoke in rhythms that sounded almost like words. And somewhere in Portland, in a booth I knew too well, a phone began to ring. I grabbed my jacket, grabbed the notebook, grabbed my phone to stay connected to the forum. This time, I wasn't going alone. This time, I was part of something bigger. This time, maybe, we'd finally get some real answers, or we'd lose everything trying. But that's the thing about being unstuck in time. You learn that everything is temporary. Every loss, every gain, every moment of clarity or confusion. It all flows back and forth like tide against shore, like lightning between clouds, like voices across years. The phone was ringing, my future was calling, my past was waiting, and every version of myself that ever was or ever would be was holding their breath, waiting to see what happened next. I ran toward the sound of ringing, toward the booth, toward whatever revelation or destruction waited there. Because that's what we do. We answer, we trade, we search for meaning in the static between moments. And sometimes, just sometimes, we find it. If you're still with me, if you've made it this far, then you understand something most people don't. You understand that time isn't a river flowing in one direction. It's an ocean. And some of us, we've learned to swim against the current. Check your hands right now. Both of them. Check for blue ink you don't remember. Check for numbers that shouldn't be there. Because if you find them, if you see even the faintest trace, then you're already one of us. And tomorrow, or yesterday, or 100 years from now, your phone is going to ring. When it does, when you hear that sound cutting through the storm, remember this story. Remember that you're not alone. Remember that somewhere, in some time, there's a version of you who's already answered, who's already learned what you need to know, who's already waiting to trade wisdom for years. The junction is opening wider every day. More phones are starting to ring. More people are becoming unstuck, and we need all the help we can get to understand why. So tell me, in the comments below, tell me what you found when you checked your hands. Tell me about the phones you've heard ringing in the dark. Tell me about the storms that brought strange dreams and stranger mornings. Tell me, so I can tell the others. Tell me, so we can find you when your time comes. Tell me, because every story shared is another piece of the pattern. And somewhere, somewhen, we're going to need every piece we can get. The storm is coming. The phones are ringing. The junction is opening. And we're all, every version of us across every timeline, waiting to see who answers next. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's always been you. Check your hands, and let me know what you find. Because I have a feeling, a terrible, wonderful feeling, that this is just the beginning. The real story, the one that matters, the one that changes everything. That story starts the moment you realize the phone has been ringing for you all along, and you just haven't answered yet. Story number 2. I found the tapes in a shoebox, tucked behind a water heater in the basement of my new apartment in Portland. 7 cassettes, each one labeled with dates from next month. November 2024, December 2024, January 2025. The handwriting on the labels, it was mine. But here's the thing. I've never owned cassettes, never recorded anything. And those dates, they hadn't happened yet. If you're listening to this right now, lying in bed, maybe with your lights off. I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you isn't fiction. It happened to me 3 weeks ago. And after you hear this, you might want to check your own basement, your own attic. Because if these tapes exist for me, who's to say they don't exist for you too? Hit that subscribe button now. Because by the end of this story, you're going to have questions. Questions I still can't answer. The story begins now. The Portland rain drummed against my window that October evening, creating rivers down the glass. I just moved into the Hawthorne district, one of those converted Victorian houses split into 4 apartments. Mine was the basement unit. Cheap rent, good bones, a little musty, but nothing a few candles couldn't fix. I was setting up my home office when I noticed the access panel to the water heater closet. The previous tenant must have painted over it, because it took a butter knife and 20 minutes to pry it open. Behind the heater, shoved into the furthest corner, was that shoebox. Nike. Men's size 10. The cardboard soft with age. Inside, 7 cassette tapes. Those old school ones from the 80s and 90s. Each one carefully labeled with a black Sharpie. The dates made my stomach drop. November 3rd, 2024. November 17th, 2024. December 1st, 2024. My hands, they started shaking. Because the handwriting, I knew it. The way I make my 7s with that little crossbar. The way my 4s never quite close at the top. This was my writing. But I'd never seen these tapes before. The first tape had something else written on it. Session 1, the beginning of understanding. I should have thrown them away. Should have called my landlord. Should have done anything except what I did next. But curiosity, it's a powerful thing. And I had an old Walkman in one of my moving boxes. A relic from college that I'd kept for some reason. Maybe for this exact moment. I popped in fresh batteries, the metallic taste of fear already coating my tongue, and pressed play on that first tape. Static, then breathing, then my voice. Dr. Morrison, I don't know if these recordings will help, but, like you said, sometimes we need to document our journey to understand where we're going. I yanked the headphones off, my heart hammering against my ribs, because I didn't know any Dr. Morrison, had never been to therapy, and that voice, it was mine. But older somehow, tired, like I'd been carrying something heavy for too long. I sat there on my bedroom floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, the rain getting heavier outside. The smart thing would be to stop, but Smart had already left the building. I pressed play again. It started with the dreams. You know, the ones where I see things before they happen. You keep saying it's pattern recognition, that my subconscious is just processing information faster than my conscious mind. But Doc, how do you explain me knowing about Sarah's accident 3 days before it happened? Sarah, my sister's name. My hands were ice cold now. The tape continued. She's fine. Thanks to the dream, I called her that morning. Told her not to take Highway 26 to work. She thought I was crazy, but she humored me. The pileup happened right where I saw it. Right at the exact time. 14 cars. 3 fatalities. And Sarah, she was safe on the back roads. Cursing Portland traffic, but alive. I paused the tape, grabbed my phone, called Sarah immediately. Hey, stranger. Her voice bright and normal. How's the new place? Sarah, this is going to sound weird, but what route do you take to work? Highway 26, like always. Why? My mouth went dry. Maybe try the back roads for a while. Construction or something. She laughed. You sound weird. You okay? Yeah, just promise me. No Highway 26 for the next few weeks. After I hung up, I stared at those tapes. 6 more. Each one dated further into my future. Each one containing what? Predictions? Warnings? I picked up the second tape, November 17th, 2024, 3 weeks away. My rational mind said this was an elaborate prank. Maybe the previous tenant's idea of a joke, but that handwriting, that voice, the details about Sarah. I pressed play on the second tape. Session 2, and you were right, journaling helps, even if it's just audio journaling. The predictions, they're getting more specific. It's not just the big things anymore. Yesterday, I knew Mrs. Chen from upstairs would knock on my door at 3:47 p.m. to borrow sugar. I knew the Amazon driver would leave my package at the wrong door. I knew that weird smell in the hallway was a dead mouse in the walls. Found it exactly where I thought it would be. I paused again, because Mrs. Chen lived upstairs. I'd met her briefly when moving in, and there was a weird smell in the hallway. The tape continued. But Doc, here's what scares me. The predictions. They're not random. They're showing me a path, like someone's laying out breadcrumbs, leading me somewhere, and I don't think I want to know where. Thunder cracked outside, making me jump. The lights flickered. In that brief darkness, I swear I heard something else on the tape. Breathing that wasn't mine. But when the lights steadied, it was just my voice again. The third dream was the worst, November 28th. Thanksgiving. I saw myself at Mom's house, but I wasn't alone. Someone was with me. Someone I haven't met yet. And the way they looked at me, like they knew everything. Like they'd been waiting. I stopped the tape. My mom lived in Bend, 3 hours away. I always spent Thanksgiving there. Always alone since the divorce. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those tapes, lined up like dominoes. Each one a step closer to something. 3 days passed. 3 days of jumping at shadows, of checking locks twice, of avoiding Highway 26 even though it added 20 minutes to my commute. Then Mrs. Chen knocked on my door. 3:47 p.m. "Sorry to bother," she said, her smile warm but tired. "Would you have some sugar? I'm making cookies for my grandson." The words hit me like ice water. I handed her the sugar, my hands trembling. After she left, I went straight for the tapes, the third one. December 1st, 2024. Session 3, Dr. Morrison. "I need to tell you about the restaurant, the one on Burnside. You know how I've been avoiding it, walking past it every day on my way to get coffee, feeling that pull? Well, I finally went in. I knew that feeling. There was a place on Burnside, unmarked door, tinted windows. I'd noticed it my first week here. Something about it made me uncomfortable. Like deja vu in reverse, if that makes sense. The woman behind the counter, she knew my name, said she'd been expecting me, had my order ready, coffee, black, with a shot of vanilla, exactly how I take it. But Doc, I'd never been there before. My coffee order, down to the vanilla shot I never told anyone about because it embarrassed me. Too fancy for a guy who wore flannel. She gave me a napkin with the coffee, had an address written on it, that old building on Division, the one that's been empty for years. She said, "When you're ready to understand, you'll go there." Then she smiled, and her eyes, God, her eyes were like looking into a mirror, like she could see every thought in my head. I paused the tape, grabbed my jacket, and headed for Burnside. I had to know, had to see if that place existed. It did. The unmarked door, the tinted windows, everything exactly as the tape described. I stood outside for 10 minutes, working up the courage. Finally, pushed through the door. Empty, not just closed. Empty. Dust on the floors. Cobwebs in the corners. Like no one had been there in months, years maybe. But on the counter, fresh as morning, was a coffee cup. Still warm. Black coffee with the faint scent of vanilla. And underneath, a napkin. An address written in handwriting I recognized. Mine. The address was for a building on Division Street. The tape had mentioned it. Said it had been empty for years. I knew the place. One of those old Portland buildings that developers kept trying to buy but somehow never did. I should have run. Should have gone home, packed my things, left Portland entirely. But the tapes, they had their hooks in me now. I needed to understand. The fourth tape, December 15th, 2024. Session 4. I went to the building, just like I knew I would. The door was unlocked. Inside, Doc, I don't know how to explain this. Inside was an exact replica of your office. Every detail. The leather chair, that weird abstract painting you hate but your wife bought. The smell of peppermint tea. Static on the tape. Then, but you weren't there. Instead, there was another tape player, another set of recordings. These ones, they were different. They weren't my voice. They were everyone's. Everyone I'd ever meet, ever know, ever lose. My apartment felt smaller suddenly. The walls closer. I walked to my window, needing to see the world outside. Normal people doing normal things. But even the street looked different now, like a stage set. Like everyone was playing a role they didn't know they'd been cast in. The tape continued. I listened to one. Just one. It was a conversation I'm going to have next month, January 15th, with someone named Alex. We meet at Powell's Books. They drop their coffee on my shoes. We laugh. We talk for hours. We fall in, Doc. I heard myself fall in love with someone I've never met. Heard the exact words we'll say. Felt the moment my life changes. January 15th, 2.5 months away. But here's the thing. Now that I know, can it still happen? If I avoid Powell's that day, does Alex still exist? Or am I trapped, playing out a script I've already heard? The tape clicked off. Auto reverse kicked in, but I didn't flip it. I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, the Portland rain starting again, and tried to make sense of what I was becoming. Because I understood now, the tapes weren't predictions. They were memories. Memories of a future that hadn't happened yet. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Coffee became my blood, anxiety my oxygen. I called in sick to work, told them I had the flu, but really, I was afraid to leave my apartment. Afraid of what I might see, who I might meet. Afraid that every interaction was predetermined. Written in a script I was only now discovering. But isolation makes you desperate. And desperation makes you stupid. I played the 5th tape. January 5th, 2025. Session 5. Dr. Morrison. I think I'm losing it. The predictions, they're constant now. I wake up knowing exactly how my day will go. Every conversation, every red light, every song on the radio. It's like living life on a delay. Everything's already happened, I'm just catching up. The voice on the tape, my voice, sounded hollow, defeated. But yesterday, something changed. I tried to break the pattern when I knew the barista would spell my name wrong. I gave a fake name. When I knew my neighbor would ask about my weekend, I took the stairs. Small rebellions, tiny changes. And you know what happened? A long pause. I could hear traffic in the background. Portland traffic, the Max train bell. Nothing. The barista still wrote Mark instead of Mark. My neighbor caught me in the lobby instead. Every change I made, the future corrected itself, like water finding its level. Like the universe has a plan, and I'm just a passenger. I stopped the tape. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hit the button, because yesterday, the barista at my coffee shop had written Mark on my cup. I'd been annoyed, almost corrected her. But didn't. Was I living it now? The future the tapes described? Or was listening to them making it happen? I grabbed my phone, scrolled through my contacts, found my college roommate, Jake. He lived in Seattle now, worked in tech, normal life, normal problems. I needed normal. Mark? Dude, it's been forever. Jake, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay, you sound weird. Everything all right? Do you believe in fate? Like, really believe that things are predetermined? He laughed. Getting philosophical on a Wednesday night, you've been smoking Portland's finest? I'm serious. A pause, then. I don't know, man. I think we make choices. But sometimes it feels like we're on rails. Like, certain things are just meant to happen. Why? I almost told him. Almost explained the tapes, the predictions. The growing certainty that I was trapped in a future I'd already lived. But how do you say that without sounding insane? Just thinking, I said instead. After we hung up, I made a decision. I'd listen to the last 2 tapes, get it over with, face whatever ending this was building toward. The 6th tape, January 20th, 2025. Session 6, I met them today, the person from Thanksgiving, the one I saw in the dream. You were right, it wasn't a stranger, it was me. Another me, from another timeline. Another set of possibilities. My blood turned to ice. They explained everything. The tapes, the predictions. The feeling of living life on a delay. We're not seeing the future, Doc. We're remembering it. Because we've lived it before, over and over. Different choices. Same destination. Like a record skipping, playing the same song with slight variations. Thunder outside, not in the recording, in my present. The lights flickered again. They told me about the building on Division. What's really inside, not your office, but a room full of tape players, thousands of them. Each one containing a different version of the same life. My life. All of them ending the same way, all of them leading to the same moment. I could barely breathe. The apartment felt like it was spinning. February 2nd, 2025, that's when it happens. That's when the loop resets. When I go back to October, find the tapes, start the cycle again. They showed me the documentation. Hundreds of journals, all in my handwriting, all describing the same 7 tapes, the same discoveries, the same growing horror. The tape hissed, clicked, continued. But this time, they said this time could be different. If I'm strong enough, if I can resist the pull, if I can avoid the final tape. The 7th one. The one that completes the circuit, the one that sends me back. I looked at the last tape. February 2nd, 2025, 3 months away, 3 months to avoid listening, 3 months to break free. But even as I thought it, I knew the truth. I'd listen, of course I'd listen, because that's what I always did, what I was always going to do. The 6th tape wasn't finished. Doc, I need you to remember this. When I come to you, when I start talking about dreams, about predictions, you need to stop me. Don't let me record these sessions. Don't let me create the tapes, break the loop from your end. Please, I'm begging you. Because I can't stop myself. I've tried. God, I've tried so many times. Static, then a different voice, older, tired. Mark, this is Dr. Morrison. If you're listening to this, it means the cycle has begun again. I'm sorry, I tried to help you, but some patterns, some loops, they're stronger than both of us. The tapes will always exist. You'll always find them, and you'll always listen, because that's your nature. To seek answers, to push forward, even when every instinct screams to run. The recording ended, but the tape kept spinning. Empty air playing back silence. January passed in a blur of predetermined moments. I met Alex at Powell's. Exactly as the tape described. Coffee on my shoes. Laughter. Hours of conversation that felt both new and hauntingly familiar. I tried to change the words, say something different, but my mouth betrayed me. Every syllable exactly as scripted. Alex had green eyes, a crooked smile, worked as a graphic designer, loved horror movies and rainy days. Perfect for Portland. Perfect for me. I didn't tell them about the tapes. February approached like a slow-motion car crash. I could see it coming, feel the inevitability, but couldn't turn the wheel. The 7th tape sat on my dresser, waiting, patient. It knew I'd break. February 1st. Tomorrow would be the day. The loop would reset. I'd wake up in October, find the tapes, start again. How many times had I done this? How many versions of me were trapped in this cycle? I called Sarah. Needed to hear her voice. Needed to know she was safe. "You sound tired," she said. "Just work stuff. Hey, you been taking the back roads?" "Yeah, actually. Funny thing, there was a huge pileup on 26 last month, right when you told me to avoid it. You psychic or something? Or something. That night, Alex stayed over. We watched old horror movies. Ate too much popcorn, acted like tomorrow was just another day, but I could feel it. The pull of that final tape, like gravity, like destiny. 3 a.m., Alex asleep beside me. I slipped out of bed, walked to the dresser, picked up the tape. February 2nd, 2025. Session 7, the end is the beginning. I could destroy it, burn it, throw it in the Willamette. But I knew, somewhere, another version would appear. The tapes always existed. Always would exist. I went to the living room, inserted the tape into the Walkman, put on the headphones, pressed play. Hello, Mark. Not my voice, not Dr. Morrison. Something else. Something that sounded like every voice and no voice. By now you understand. The tapes, the loop, the beautiful prison you've built for yourself. You wanted to know the future. And now you do, every moment, every breath. Every ending that leads to a new beginning. I wanted to stop it, but my finger wouldn't move. The building on Division. Dr. Morrison's office, the coffee shop. They're all real, all fake, all part of the machine you created. A perfect system for someone who needs to control everything, who needs to know everything, who can't accept that some stories don't have endings. They just have moments where we choose to stop telling them. The voice grew softer, more familiar, more like mine. You can break the loop, Mark. It's simple. Stop listening, stop seeking. Stop needing to know what comes next. Let life surprise you. Let it terrify you. Let it be unknown. Static building. The tape wearing out, or time itself fraying at the edges. But you won't. Because that's not who you are. You'll finish this tape. You'll feel the pull. You'll close your eyes. And when you open them, I closed my eyes. Not because the tape told me to, because I was tired. So tired of knowing, of predicting, of living life like a rerun. When you open them, you'll be in October, in your new apartment, and you'll find a shoebox, and you'll think, just this once, you'll make a different choice. The static grew louder, became white noise, became silence. I opened my eyes. Portland rain against my window, boxes half unpacked around me. The access panel to the water heater closet, painted shut, but I knew what was behind it. I always knew. My phone buzzed. Sarah texting. "Hey stranger, how's the new place?" I stared at that panel, at the butter knife on my counter, at the future waiting in a shoebox. 7 tapes, 7 sessions. 7 steps in a dance I'd done before. Maybe this time I wouldn't look. But even as I thought it, my hand was already reaching for the knife, already prying at the paint, already seeking answers to questions I shouldn't ask. Because that's what I do. That's what I always do. The tapes were waiting. Patient. Eternal. They knew I'd come. I always come. And somewhere, somewhen, another version of me is finishing the 7th tape, closing their eyes, starting again. An endless loop of discovery and horror and the terrible burden of knowing too much. But here's the thing that keeps me going, keeps me searching, keeps me listening. What if one time, just one time, the tapes are different? What if the future changes? What if... I pulled out the shoebox. Nike, size 10. 7 tapes inside, but wait, there was an 8th tape. One I'd never seen before. never heard before. The label read, "For the one who finally breaks free." My hands shook as I reached for it. And that's where I stopped. That's where I always stop. Because some stories, they don't need endings. They need questions. They need you lying in bed right now, wondering, what was on that 8th tape? Do the tapes exist? Could they exist? Check your basement tomorrow. Check your attic. Check the places you've been avoiding. And if you find a shoebox, well, you know what comes next, don't you? If this story kept you awake, if you're already planning to check your storage spaces, hit subscribe. Share this with someone who needs a good scare. And tell me in the comments, would you have listened to the tapes? Or would you have been stronger than me? Sleep tight. Story number 3. I found the journal 3 weeks after they disappeared. Not the police, not the search teams, me, a nobody who just happened to take the wrong trail at Pine Ridge National Park in Colorado. The leather cover was damp from morning dew, cracked along the spine like it had been opened and closed 1,000 times. Inside, the first page had a name, Marcus Chen, one of the missing hikers, along with Sarah Martinez and Jake Thompson, 3 experienced backpackers who'd set out on the Whispering Pine Trail and simply vanished. But here's what'll keep you up tonight. What made me nearly drop that journal when I flipped to the last entry, the footprints they'd been following? They weren't just disappearing behind them, they were vanishing while they watched. If you're listening to this in bed right now, maybe with the lights off, thinking this is just another campfire story, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you is why I haven't been able to sleep for 3 weeks, why I check behind me constantly, why I'll never, ever set foot on a hiking trail again. And if you make it to the end of this story, you'll understand why some trails should never be followed, no matter where they lead. The story begins now. My name is Emma Walsh, and I used to love hiking. Those 2 words carry the weight of everything that changed that October morning when I decided to explore a section of Pine Ridge I'd never visited before. I'd been hiking since college, started with easy trails around Boulder, worked my way up to 14ers, even did a section of the Pacific Crest Trail last summer. I thought I knew the mountains, thought I understood the rules. Stay on marked paths, carry emergency supplies, tell someone where you're going. But there are older rules in these mountains. Rules nobody teaches you at REI or includes in trail guides. Rules written in vanishing footprints and desperate journal entries. That morning started like any other. Coffee at 5 a.m., protein bar in the car, reaching the trailhead just as dawn painted the peaks orange and gold. Pine Ridge isn't as popular as Rocky Mountain National Park, which is exactly why I loved it. Fewer crowds, more wildlife. That feeling of actually being alone with nature. The parking lot was empty except for one other car. A blue Subaru Outback with Colorado plates and a Hike More, Worry Less bumper sticker. I remember thinking whoever owned it had good taste. Remember wondering which trail they'd taken? I'd planned to do the Falcons Loop, a moderate 8-mile circuit I'd done twice before. But when I reached the fork where Falcons Loop split from the main trail, I noticed something, a narrow path I'd never seen before, branching off to the left. No official marker, but clearly used. The kind of social trail that develops when enough hikers decide the marked path isn't interesting enough. I should have stayed on Falcons Loop, should have stuck to my plan. But the morning was perfect, crisp and clear, and I had plenty of daylight. What harm could there be in a little exploration? The unmarked trail wound upward through stands of aspen already turned gold for fall. Their leaves whispered in the breeze, that distinctive rustling that sounds almost like rainfall. For the first mile, everything was beautiful, perfect, even. The path was well worn, easy to follow, climbing steadily but not too steep. Then I noticed the footprints. Fresh tracks in a muddy section where a small stream crossed the trail. 3 sets. Heading upward, 2 larger prints, Probably men's boots size 10 or 11, one smaller set, maybe a woman's size 8. The tread patterns were distinct, expensive hiking boots, not the cheap stuff weekend warriors wear. Professional hikers, I thought. Like me, people who knew what they were doing. But something about those prints made me pause, made me crouch down for a closer look. It wasn't what I saw that bothered me, it was what I didn't see. The prints went up the trail, clear and deep in the mud. But there were no prints coming back down. Now. That's not unusual. Plenty of trails are one way, with different routes down. But this path, as far as I could tell, was an out and back. The only way down was the way I'd come up. I told myself they were still ahead of me, probably at whatever viewpoint or lake this trail led to. I'd likely run into them coming back down. We'd nod, maybe exchange a few words about the weather or trail conditions. The way hikers do, I kept climbing. The trail grew steeper, narrower. The aspens gave way to lodgepole pines, their straight trunks creating a corridor of shadows even in the morning light, every few hundred yards. I'd spot those footprints again in softer soil, still heading up. Still, just the 3 sets. After another mile, I found their first camp. It wasn't much, just a flat spot beside a boulder where they'd clearly stopped to rest. Energy bar wrappers, the kind serious hikers carry, were tucked neatly under a rock. A half-empty water bottle sat forgotten against the boulder. Expensive brand, the kind with the built-in filter. I picked up the bottle. It was still cold. They couldn't be more than an hour ahead of me, maybe 2. But something felt wrong, really wrong. Experienced hikers don't leave gear behind, especially not water. Not at this elevation where dehydration sneaks up fast. I called out, "Hello? Anyone up there?" My voice echoed off the mountainside, came back to me changed, distorted. No response. Just the wind in the pines and somewhere far off. The harsh call of a crow. I left the water bottle where I'd found it, in case they came back for it. I told myself, but I knew they wouldn't. Could feel it in that crawling sensation along my spine, the one that millions of years of evolution gave us to know when we're being watched, when we're prey. The trail continued up, and I followed. Don't ask me why. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was concern for fellow hikers. Maybe it was just that stubborn streak that makes us push forward when every instinct screams to turn back. 20 minutes later, I found the journal. It was sitting on a flat rock right in the middle of the trail. Impossible to miss, like someone had placed it there deliberately, wanting it to be found. The leather cover was good quality, the kind you buy at one of those upscale outdoor shops in Denver. Water-resistant, but not waterproof. Worn soft with use. I picked it up, opened it. The first page, like I said, had Marcus Chen's name, along with an address in Fort Collins and a phone number. Below that, in smaller text, "If found, please return, reward offered." I flipped through the pages. Most were filled with what you'd expect. Trail conditions, weather notes, wildlife sightings. Marcus was methodical, recording temperatures, distances, elevation gains. The kind of hiker who plans every detail, accounts for every variable. The entries went back 3 years. Dozens of hikes throughout Colorado, some in Utah and Wyoming. Photos tucked between pages showed a young Asian man with an easy smile, sometimes alone, sometimes with others. I recognized 2 of his frequent companions from the news coverage. Sarah Martinez, a woman about my age with dark hair always pulled back in a practical ponytail, and Jake Thompson, tall and lanky with a reddish beard and kind eyes. The final entries started 5 days ago, October 15th. Day 1, Pine Ridge attempt #3. Finally convinced Sarah and Jake to try the Whispering Pine Trail. Been wanting to explore this route since I heard about it from that old timer at the gear shop in Eastus. Says it leads to an old mining camp from the 1880s. Perfect weather. Started at 6:47 a.m., making good time. October 16th. Day 2, camped near Elmwood Creek last night. Strange dreams. All three of us had them. Sarah swears she heard voices in the wind, speaking words in the language she didn't recognize. Jake thinks it was just the creek, but I'm not so sure. The forest feels different here. Older. We're pushing on to the mining camp today. October 17th. Day 2 evening, found the camp, or what's left of it. A few rotting cabin foundations, some rusted equipment. But there's something else. Footprints everywhere. In the dust inside the cabins, on trails leading nowhere around our tent. Hundreds of them. Different sizes, different boots, like a crowd was here recently. But the weird thing? Some of them just stop, mid-stride, like whoever made them vanished between one step and the next. My hands were trembling as I turned the page. The next entry was harder to read. The handwriting rushed, slanted. October 18th. Day 3. We need to leave, now. The footprints we saw yesterday, they're gone, all of them. The ground is smooth like they never existed. But there are new ones, fresh, following the exact paths the old ones took. And, God, I can barely write this. We watched it happen, watched a line of prints appear in the dust, one by one. Like someone invisible was walking. They came right up to our tent, stopped, then started again, heading up the trail. Sarah's crying. Jake won't talk. We're packing up, getting out, but our own footprints, the ones we made getting here, they're starting to fade. October 19th, the final entry. Day 4. We can't find the trail. It's gone. Not overgrown, not hidden. Gone, like it never existed. The footprints are everywhere now, appearing and disappearing. Sometimes we see them form right in front of us. Sometimes we turn around and our own tracks from moments before have vanished. Sarah thinks we're becoming like them. The other hikers, the ones who made all those prints, she says she can feel it, a pulling sensation. Like something's trying to drag us sideways out of the world. Jake's boots, his footprints are already starting to look strange, faded, like old photographs left in the sun. Mine too. We're going to try following the creek down. Water always leads somewhere. If anyone finds this, don't come looking for us. And whatever you do, don't follow footprints that shouldn't exist. That was it. The last entry. I stood there on that trail, journal in my hands, trying to process what I'd read. The rational part of my brain offered explanations. Altitude sickness, dehydration, mass hallucination brought on by bad water or spoiled food. The human mind can play terrible tricks when stressed. But another part of me, the ancient part that kept our ancestors alive in the darkness, believed every word. I looked down at the trail, at those 3 sets of footprints I'd been following. They were still there, still clear in the dirt, but as I watched, the edges seemed to blur, like looking at something through water. No, I blinked hard, looked again. The prints were solid, real. I was letting the journal get to me, letting fear override logic, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to leave. Immediately, I turned to head back down the trail, and that's when I saw them, new footprints, in the soft earth where I'd just walked, following my exact path. But these weren't my prints. My boots have a distinctive chevron pattern on the sole. Size 7, these were different, larger, with a tread pattern I didn't recognize. They hadn't been there 5 minutes ago when I'd walked up this section of trail. I was certain of it. My heart hammered against my ribs as I looked closer. The prints were perfect, too perfect. Each one exactly the same depth, the same pressure, like they'd been stamped into the earth rather than made by actual walking. And they stopped right where I was standing. I ran. I'm not proud of running. 20 years of hiking experience, wilderness first aid certification, enough backcountry time to know that panic is the enemy. But in that moment, with those impossible footprints behind me and Marcus Chen's journal clutched in my sweaty hands, all that experience meant nothing. I ran down that trail like something was chasing me, slipping on loose rocks, branches catching at my pack, my breath coming in ragged gasps that echoed off the mountainside. Behind me, I swear I could hear it. Not footsteps exactly, but a presence, a weight in the air, a feeling of being followed by something that didn't need to make sound. The trail blurred past, lodgepole pines whipping by in a green smear, the morning sun, which had felt so welcoming just an hour before, now seemed cold, distant, like it was shining on a world I was slowly sliding out of. I reached the spot where I'd found the water bottle. It was gone. Not knocked over, not moved. Gone. Like it had never been there. The energy bar wrappers, too. No sign anyone had ever stopped here. That's when I made myself slow down, made myself think. If I kept running blindly, I'd make a mistake, trip, fall, break an ankle or worse. And then I'd be truly trapped. Another missing hiker for the statistics. Another unsolved disappearance in the mountains. I forced myself to walk, to breathe, to pay attention to the trail. It looked the same. Mostly. The same rocks, the same turns, the same trees. But something was off, like looking at a familiar room where someone has moved all the furniture just an inch or two. Everything almost right, but not quite. The footprints I'd been following, Marcus and Sarah and Jake's prints, they were changing. I stopped to examine them where the trail crossed a muddy seep. They were still there, but fainter now, like old impressions that had been rained on and dried, then rained on again. Layers of time compressed into something that shouldn't exist, and beside them, new prints, dozens of them, different boots, different sizes, some old-fashioned with hobnail patterns that hadn't been used in decades, some modern, some that looked almost right, but not quite, like someone had tried to recreate the idea of a footprint without understanding how weight and movement really worked. They all went up. None came down. I kept the journal pressed against my chest as I descended. Some irrational part of me thought that as long as I held on to it, I had proof, evidence that I wasn't losing my mind, that 3 real people had experienced something impossible on this mountain. The trail switchbacked through a grove of aspens, and I remembered passing this spot on the way up. Remembered thinking how beautiful the golden leaves were against the blue sky. Now, those same leaves seemed to whisper secrets. The shadows between the white trunks held shapes that weren't quite right. That's when I noticed my own footprints. The ones I'd made on the way up were still there in a patch of soft dirt. But they looked old, weathered, like I'd passed this way weeks ago, not hours. And worse. Much worse. There were other prints following them, matching my stride perfectly, sometimes overlapping, sometimes just beside. Like something had been walking with me, step for step, invisible and patient. I stopped, turned in a slow circle, scanning the forest, nothing. Just trees and shadows and that oppressive feeling of being watched by eyes that weren't quite there. Is someone there? My voice cracked, came out smaller than I intended. If this is some kind of joke, but I knew it wasn't. The fear crawling up my spine was too real, too primal. The whisper came from everywhere and nowhere. Not words exactly, more like the suggestion of words. The way wind through branches can almost sound like conversation if you listen too hard. But underneath that almost language, I heard something that made my blood freeze. My name, soft, patient, like something that had all the time in the world. Emma. I ran again. Screw wisdom, screw experience. Sometimes the animal brain knows best. The trail seemed longer going down, stretched out like one of those nightmares where the hallway keeps extending no matter how fast you run. My legs burned. My lungs screamed for air, but I didn't stop, couldn't stop, because now I could hear them clearly. Footsteps all around me, the sound of dozens, maybe hundreds of invisible hikers, boots on dirt, the swish of pants legs, the creak of pack straps. An entire crowd moving through the forest, surrounding me, pacing me, and underneath it all, that whisper, getting louder, more insistent. "Emma, join us, just step sideways." I burst out of the aspens into a small meadow and had to skid to a stop. The trail was gone, not covered, not hidden, gone, where it should have continued down the mountain. There was just unbroken grass, like the path had never existed. I spun around. The trail I'd just run down ended at the exact spot where I stood, clean as a knife cut. This was impossible. Trails don't just vanish. But then again, footprints don't appear on their own. And missing hikers don't write about stepping sideways out of the world. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. No signal, of course, but the GPS still worked. Should still show my location. The screen flickered, showed me standing in the middle of nothing. No trails marked, no landmarks, just a dot in an expanse of green that, according to the map, didn't exist. Think, Emma, think. Marcus had written about following water. Water always leads somewhere. I could hear a creek off to my left, hidden in the trees, but definitely there. The sound of it was real, solid, something that belonged to the world I knew. I pushed through the underbrush toward the sound. Branches caught at my clothes, left scratches on my arms. But pain was good, pain was real. Pain meant I was still here, still solid, still me. The creek was smaller than I'd hoped, maybe 3 feet wide, running clear and cold over granite stones. But it was moving downhill, and downhill meant civilization. Eventually, I started following it, staying close to the water like it was a lifeline, which maybe it was, because the footsteps, the invisible crowd, they seemed reluctant to come too close to the running water. I could still hear them, feel them, but they kept their distance, circling like predators afraid of fire. The sun climbed higher. The day grew warm. Normal things. Real things. I clung to these sensations, used them to anchor myself. I was Emma Walsh. I was 28 years old. I lived in an apartment in Golden with a temperamental cat named Schrodinger. I had a job at a marketing firm that I didn't love but didn't hate. I was real. I was here. I was not going to vanish like footprints in dust. The creek led me through sections of forest I didn't recognize, past rock formations that shouldn't have been there according to my mental map of the area. But I kept following it. What choice did I have? Hours passed, or what felt like hours. Time seemed elastic, stretching and compressing. The sun moved in ways that didn't quite make sense, jumping across the sky when I wasn't looking directly at it. And always, the footprints. They appeared in the mud beside the creek, paced me along the bank. Sometimes I'd see them form, a depression appearing in the soft earth like an invisible weight was stepping down. Sometimes I'd look back and see my own prints fading, becoming transparent, like I was slowly losing my grip on the world. That's when I understood what Sarah had meant in the journal. The pulling sensation, the feeling of being dragged sideways. It was subtle at first, like the gentle tug of an undertow. Easy to ignore if you kept moving, kept focusing on the real, the solid, the now. But it was getting stronger. The creek led me to a small pool fed by a waterfall, maybe 12 feet high, the water cascading over dark rocks worn smooth by centuries in any other circumstance. It would have been beautiful. The kind of spot you'd stop for lunch, take photos, maybe even brave the cold water for a quick swim. But I barely saw it, because standing beside the pool, as solid and real as the rocks themselves, were three people: Marcus Chen, Sarah Martinez, Jake Thompson. They looked exactly like their photos in the journal. Marcus, compact and athletic. Sarah, with her practical ponytail. Jake, towering over the others with his distinctive red beard. They wore the same clothes described in the news reports, carried the same packs. But something was wrong with the way they stood. Too still, too perfect. Like mannequins arranged to look natural but missing some essential human quality. "Don't come any closer." Sarah's voice was flat, emotionless. We're not safe to be around." I stopped at the edge of the pool, every instinct screaming at me to run, but where? The invisible footsteps still paced behind me. The trail had vanished. These three might be my only chance to understand what was happening. "You're the missing hikers." It wasn't a question. "I found your journal." Marcus nodded slowly. The movement looked rehearsed, mechanical. "You shouldn't have followed our trail. Shouldn't have come looking. Now you're caught too." "Caught in what?" My voice rose, cracked with fear and frustration. "What is this place? What's happening to us?" Jake was the one who answered. His eyes focused on something past my shoulder, something I couldn't see. "It's old, older than the mountains, older than anything that makes sense. It collects things, people, moments, footprints in time." "It doesn't make sense," I said it. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew sense had abandoned me the moment I'd stepped onto that unmarked trail. "The mining camp," Sarah said, still in that flat voice. "The one we found. It was never a mining camp, it was a trap. A place where the walls between things get thin, where you can step sideways out of the world if you're not careful. Or if something pulls you," Marcus added. "We've been walking for days, weeks, maybe years. Time doesn't work right here. We leave footprints everywhere, but we're nowhere. Caught between steps, between moments." I looked at them more carefully, noticed details I'd missed before. Their clothes showed no wear, no dirt, despite supposedly hiking for days. Their boots were clean, their faces unweathered by sun or wind, like they'd been preserved, frozen at the moment of their disappearance. "There has to be a way out," I said. Pleaded. "Really? You're talking to me. You're here. That means you're still real, still alive." Jake laughed. The sound was wrong. Like an echo of an echo. "Are we? Sometimes I'm not sure. Sometimes I think we're just footprints ourselves, impressions left behind, going through the motions of being human. The water helps." Sarah gestured to the pool. "Running water is real. It belongs to the world. Anchor yourself to it. Don't let go. Don't follow the footprints. Don't listen to the whispers." "But you followed them," I said. "In the journal, Marcus wrote that you followed the new footprints up the trail." Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. A moment of recognition, of regret. "We thought they were leading somewhere. Thought if we followed them far enough, we'd find answers, find a way out. But they just led us deeper. Led us here." "Where is here?" "Between." All three said it at once. The synchronized response made my skin crawl. Between moments, between steps, between real and not. We can see the world, but we can't touch it, can't change it. Can only leave footprints that appear and disappear, hoping someone notices, hoping someone cares. I care. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "I'll tell people. I'll bring help. Search teams, scientists, someone who can figure this out." Sarah shook her head slowly. "They've tried. Others have come looking. Where do you think all those footprints came from? Dozens of hikers over the years, maybe hundreds. all following trails that shouldn't exist, all ending up here, between. Some give up, Jake said. Stop fighting the pull. Let themselves fade completely, become nothing but footprints appearing and disappearing randomly. A kind of ghost, but less than that. Just an impression, a memory of movement. Others keep walking. Marcus added, keep trying to find a way back. That's what we do, walk and walk and walk, leaving prints everywhere, hoping, always hoping. I felt it then, stronger than before. The pull Sarah had written about, like gravity, but sideways. Like the world was tilting and I was sliding off the edge. My feet felt less solid, my body less real. I looked down and gasped. My boots were transparent. I could see the rocks beneath them through the leather and rubber. And my footprints in the mud beside the pool. They were fading even as I watched, becoming shallow, then faint, then gone. No, I stumbled backward, away from the three hikers, away from their terrible stillness. No, I won't. I can't. Fight it, Sarah said. And for the first time, emotion crept into her voice. Hold on to the water. Hold on to the world. Don't let it take you, not yet. I dropped to my knees beside the pool, plunged my hands into the icy water. The shock of it, the cold, the wetness, it was real. It was now. I focused on that sensation, used it to anchor myself. My hands solidified, became opaque again, but I could feel the pull still there, patient, inexorable, waiting for me to tire, to give up, to take that step sideways. How long? I asked. How long can I fight it? The three hikers exchanged looks. In that moment, they seemed almost human again. We don't know, Marcus admitted. Time is different here. Sometimes it feels like minutes, sometimes centuries. But the pull never stops, never weakens. Eventually, he didn't need to finish. Eventually, everyone gives in. Everyone fades. Everyone becomes just another set of mysterious footprints on a trail that shouldn't exist. The journal, I said suddenly. I still have your journal. If I can get it out, get it to someone. Maybe they can figure out what this is, how to stop it. If you can get out, Jake's voice was gentle, but the words were brutal. We thought the same thing, thought we could warn people, save others. But the trails all lead back here. Every path we take, every direction we try, we always end up back at this pool, back between. I looked at the journal still clutched in my hands. The leather cover was fading too, becoming translucent like everything else about me. Soon it would be gone, like I would be gone, like we were all gone. Just footprints in the dust. But I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. I stood, water dripping from my hands, making dark spots on the rocks that proved I was still here, still real enough to affect the world. There has to be a way. People don't just vanish. Physics doesn't work like that. There's an explanation, a solution. Physics. Sarah laughed, but it was sad, not mocking. We thought that too. Jake had theories, dimensional rifts, quantum entanglement, temporal anomalies. But theories don't matter when you're living the impossible. Show me, I said. Show me what happens when you try to leave. They looked at each other again. That synchronized movement that made them seem less like individuals and more like parts of a whole. Are you sure? Marcus asked. Once you see it, really see it, it gets harder to fight, harder to believe you can escape. I'm already seeing impossible things. I gestured at my semi-transparent boots. Show me. They turned as one and began walking away from the pool, following the creek downstream. I followed, keeping my distance, some instinct warning me not to get too close, not to let whatever had them catch me too. We walked for what felt like 10 minutes, the creek babbling beside us, the forest normal and peaceful. Then, without warning, we were back at the pool, Not a similar pool, the exact same rocks, the same waterfall, the same spot where I'd knelt and plunged my hands into the water. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Every direction," Jake said. "Every path, they all curve back, like space is folded, like we're in a bubble outside normal reality." I tried again, this time heading 90 degrees from the creek, pushing through thick undergrowth, counting my steps, 100, 200, 300. And then I was stepping out of the trees back at the pool, the three hikers waiting with expressions that might have been sympathy. "The footprints," Sarah said. "They're not just footprints, they're connections, links to the real world. Every time someone sees them, wonders about them, we get a little more solid, a little more real, but it never lasts. That's why you leave them everywhere." Understanding dawned. "You're trying to be noticed, trying to stay tethered." Marcus nodded. "But fewer people come here now, the trail, the real trail. It's been closed for years. Officially dangerous, unstable terrain. Only people like you, who ignore the warnings, who go off the marked paths." "How many others are there?" I asked. "People like you, like us, caught between—" "We don't know." Jake looked around at the empty forest. "Sometimes we see signs. Fresh footprints we didn't make, items left behind. But we never see the people. Maybe they're in their own bubbles, their own between spaces, or maybe they've faded completely." Sarah finished. "Become just the footprints, no consciousness left, no hope, just an automatic pattern, walking forever, leaving marks that vanish." I felt the pull again, stronger now, my whole body wanting to drift, to step sideways, to stop fighting. "The water," I said desperately. "You said the water helps. What if we follow it? Not the bank, but in the stream itself." "We tried," Marcus said. "The water goes somewhere we can't follow, passes through spaces too small, too real. We can't—" He paused, looked at me with something like hope. "But you're not fully caught yet. You're still fighting. Still partially in the real world. Maybe I can fit through spaces you can't." I finished. "Maybe I can still get out." It was a slim hope, probably false, but it was something. I sat down by the pool, pulled off my boots, my socks, rolled up my pants. The rocks under the water were slippery, cold, but solid. Real. "If I make it," I said, "I'll tell everyone. I'll make them believe. I'll find a way to help you. Don't make promises." Sarah's voice was gentle. "We made promises too. To each other. To ourselves. Promises are just another kind of footprint here. They fade." But I could see it in their eyes. All three of them. Despite the flatness. Despite the wrongness. A spark of hope. Maybe the first they'd felt in however long they'd been here. I stepped into the pool. The cold was shocking, brutal, but it made me feel more solid, more real than I'd felt since finding the journal. "Thank you," Marcus said. "For looking, for caring, even if—" He didn't finish, didn't need to. I waded deeper. The current tugged at my legs, tried to push me back, but I pressed forward, toward where the creek flowed out of the pool, narrowing, speeding up, disappearing between rocks too close together for a person to follow. Unless that person was only half there. Unless that person was already fading. I took a breath, focused on the cold, on the wet, on the real, and squeezed myself into the gap between the rocks. Pain brought me back to myself. Real pain. The kind that meant blood and bruises and a body solid enough to be damaged. I was lying in shallow water, rocks digging into my back, the sky above me the bright, cloudless blue of a Colorado afternoon. I could hear birds, real birds, not the mechanical recordings that had seemed to play on loop in that between space. Every part of me hurt. My hands were scraped raw, my clothes torn. One knee throbbed with what would become a spectacular bruise. But I was here. Solid. Real. I sat up slowly. The creek babbled around me, maybe 2 feet wide here, normal. The trees looked right, cast shadows that made sense. The air smelled like pine and earth and autumn. I looked down at my boots. Solid leather, solid rubber, leaving clear, deep prints in the muddy bank. The journal was still clutched in my hands. Waterlogged now, but real. Proof that it hadn't all been some altitude-induced hallucination. I stood on shaking legs, looked around, recognized where I was. Maybe a mile below the Pine Ridge parking area. On a section of trail I'd hiked dozens of times. The Elmwood Creek Trail, popular, well-marked, safe. My phone, miraculously, still worked. The screen was cracked, but it showed signal bars. The time said 4:17 p.m. Still October 23rd. The same day I'd started hiking. But that couldn't be right. I'd been gone for hours? Days? Time in that place had felt elastic, meaningless. I called 911, told them about the missing hikers, that I'd found evidence of where they'd gone. The dispatcher sounded skeptical when I mentioned finding them, but she took my location. Said search and rescue would meet me at the parking area. The hike back was surreal, everything so normal, so mundane. Families with small children passed me on the trail. A group of college kids laughed as they took selfies by a scenic overlook. Nobody vanished. No footprints appeared from nowhere. Just a beautiful autumn day in the mountains. But I kept checking behind me. Kept looking at my own footprints to make sure they stayed solid. Stayed real. The parking lot was chaos when I arrived. 3 search and rescue vehicles. 2 police cars. An ambulance. They descended on me immediately, checking for injuries, asking questions, demanding to know where I'd been, where the hikers were. I showed them the journal, tried to explain, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew how they sounded. Impossible, delusional, the ravings of someone who'd been lost in the woods, dehydrated, confused. They were kind about it. Wrapped me in a blanket, gave me water, took the journal as evidence. The lead search coordinator, a weathered woman named Captain Torres, listened to my whole story without interrupting, but I could see it in her eyes. She thought I'd had some kind of breakdown, found the journal and constructed an elaborate fantasy around it. "We'll check the area you described," she said finally. "But Emma, you need to understand. That section of the park has been closed for 3 years, after the Mitchell family disappeared. The trails are all overgrown, washed out. There's no way you could have hiked where you're describing." "Then how do you explain the journal?" I asked. "How do you explain how I got there?" She didn't have an answer for that. They kept me for observation at the hospital overnight. Ran tests. Everything came back normal. Physically, I was fine, exhausted, dehydrated, bruised, but fine. The psychiatrist they sent was less convinced. Dr. Patel, soft-spoken, patient. He asked careful questions about what I'd experienced, took notes, made understanding noises. "Extreme stress can cause very vivid hallucinations," he said finally. "The mind's way of processing trauma. You were lost, frightened. Your brain created a narrative to make sense of it. But the journal," I protested, "could have been there for days, weeks. You found it, read it, incorporated it into your experience." He leaned forward, kind but clinical. "Emma, I've seen this before. Hikers who get lost, who experience something their rational mind can't process. The important thing is that you're safe now, that you're back." But was I? Really back? They released me the next morning. My roommate, Becca, picked me up, fussed over me, made me tea, acted like I'd returned from the dead, which maybe I had, in a way. "The news is going crazy," she said. "Missing hiker finds evidence, refuses to reveal location. They're saying you might be charged with obstruction if you don't cooperate with the search. I told them everything, I said tiredly. They just don't believe me. Over the next days, I watched the news coverage, watched them search the wrong areas, the safe areas, the places that made sense. They never found the unmarked trail, never found the mining camp, never found any trace of Marcus, Sarah, or Jake. But I knew they wouldn't. Some places don't want to be found, can't be found, unless they choose you. A week later, the footprints started appearing. The first one showed up in my apartment. A single boot print on the bathroom floor when I got out of the shower. Wrong size, wrong tread pattern. There one moment, gone the next, then more, in the hallway, on the balcony. Sometimes I'd catch them forming. A depression appearing in the carpet like someone invisible was walking through my living room. I knew who they were, my 3 hikers, still trying, still fighting, using me as an anchor, a connection to the real world. I started photographing them, every print, every appearance. Built a file. Evidence that I wasn't crazy, that something impossible was happening. But photos of footprints only prove so much, and they always faded before anyone else could see them. Dr. Patel increased my medication, suggested inpatient treatment. I smiled, nodded, pretended the footprints had stopped. They hadn't. 3 weeks, that's how long it's been now. 3 weeks since I found that journal. Since I met 3 people who shouldn't exist in a place that couldn't be real. The footprints come every day now, sometimes just 1 or 2, sometimes dozens. They follow me to work, appear in my car, show up in places I've never been, and late at night, when everything's quiet, I can hear them, faint, distant, but there, footsteps pacing outside my window, the whisper of voices that aren't quite there. My name carried on wind that doesn't blow in this world. Emma, don't forget, don't let us fade. I won't forget, can't forget. They're depending on me. My 3 lost hikers, caught between footsteps, between moments, between worlds. But here's what terrifies me. What keeps me up at night checking my own footprints, making sure they're still solid, still real. Yesterday, I was walking to my car after work, glanced back and saw my footprints in a puddle. Clear, perfect, exactly where they should be. But for just a moment, just a heartbeat, they flickered, became transparent, like an old photo held up to the light. The pull is still there, weak, ignorable, but there. That sideways gravity, that invitation to step between. I thought I escaped, thought the water saved me, brought me back to the real world. But what if I'm wrong? What if there is no escape? What if once you've been to that place, seen behind the curtain of reality, you can never truly come back? What if I'm just another footprint now, a little more solid than the others, a little more real, but fading, always fading? Marcus said time works differently there, said sometimes minutes feel like centuries. What if my escape, my return, my 3 weeks back in the real world? What if it's just another kind of between? A momentary solidifying before the final fade? I don't know, can't know. All I can do is hold on. Stay anchored, keep fighting the pull, and leave this record, this story, like footprints in the dust, hoping someone sees, someone believes, someone cares. Because if I'm right, if the pull never really lets go, then one day I'll wake up and my footprints won't just flicker. They'll vanish. And I'll vanish with them. Just another missing hiker, another unsolved disappearance, another set of mysterious footprints on a trail that shouldn't exist. So please, if you're listening to this, if you've made it this far, remember my name. Remember Marcus Chen, Sarah Martinez, Jake Thompson. Remember that we were real, that we were here, and whatever you do, whatever trail you're planning to hike this weekend, However experienced you think you are, stay on the marked paths. Don't follow strange footprints. And if you see a trail that wasn't there before, a path that seems to call to you, that promises adventure and discovery, turn around, walk away, run if you have to, because some trails don't lead anywhere you want to go. Some footprints aren't meant to be followed. And some places collect more than just memories. Wait, do you hear that? There, outside my window, footsteps on the fire escape. But I live on the 3rd floor, and that fire escape was removed 2 years ago. They're here, all 3 of them. I can see their shadows through the curtain, more solid than they've ever been. They're knocking now, soft, patient, like they have all the time in the world. Should I answer? The sound of a door opening. Oh God, I can see through my hand. If you're still listening, remember us. We were here. We were real. Recording ends. Did this story leave you with questions? Are those footprints outside your window real, or something else? Share your theories in the comments below, and if you want to hear more true stories from the edge of reality, stories that'll make you question every shadow and second-guess every sound, hit that subscribe button, because some mysteries are meant to be shared before they fade away completely. Sweet dreams, if you can manage them. Now, sleep. Or at least try to. It's quiet now, too quiet, but not empty. That feeling crawling up your spine, that weight pressing on your chest, that's not your imagination. You're not alone. There's something behind the curtain. You haven't looked, not because you forgot, but because you're afraid to know. You heard the whisper, software wet, wrong. Like breath dragged across broken glass. But you told yourself it was the wind, didn't you? That lie made you feel safe. Temporarily. Let me ask you, does the wind whisper your name? Does the wind tap lightly, again and again, from the same spot, behind the curtain, every night? Does the wind leave scratches on your window that weren't there this morning? Thin, sharp, like claws, like warnings. You don't remember opening the window. You never open the window. But it's unlocked now. You could check, you could stand up, you could walk over and pull the curtain back. But you won't, because you know. You know what's waiting, not because you've seen it, but because you felt it. In the quiet, in the dark. Every time you close your eyes, every time you wake up and your blanket is just slightly moved. Your door slightly cracked. You try to explain it. Your mind wants to explain it. But that whisper, that sound that only comes when you're alone, when everything is still, when the night is at its deepest, that's not a dream, that's a presence. It doesn't want your fear, it wants your attention. It feeds on the moment you doubt yourself. The second you wonder if you heard something, the instant your heart rate rises. That's when it leans closer. It's been patient, watching, learning you like prey. You ever notice it never shows up when the lights are on, when someone's in the room? It waits for the ritual, the brushing of your teeth, the turning off of lights, the last look at your phone, the deep breath just before sleep. That's when it wakes up. That's when it stirs behind the curtain. Sometimes it watches you all night. Sometimes it moves. A shift in the shadow. A faint creak on the floorboards. The sound of fabric sliding over skin. And when you don't check, when you ignore it, that's when it comes closer. Not fast, not loud, just closer. You might feel a cold spot on the bed. You might feel breath on your neck. You might hear a whisper in your ear that sounds almost like your voice. It copies, it mimics, it blends, not to confuse you, to prepare you, because soon it won't need the curtain, it won't need shadows, it will sit beside you, stand behind you, speak through you. You won't even know when it happens. You'll wake up, look in the mirror, and something will be off. Your eyes won't blink quite right, your smile will linger too long. your reflection will move just a little after you do. And the people around you? They'll say you seem different. Not worse, just not you. But tonight you're still you. Still in control, for now. You could still check. You could still confront it. Pull the curtain back, face it, but deep down, you've already made your choice. You won't. Because you'd rather lie still, let your eyes drift shut, and hope sleep comes quickly. And it will. But what you wake up as might not be the same. Now, if you've made it this far, congratulations. You're not just a viewer, you're part of something bigger. Something that watches with you, that sits beside you as you watch, as you listen, as you wait. Because this story doesn't end when the screen fades to black. It follows you into the next room, into your dreams, into your reflection. If you liked this story, like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss the next one, so we don't miss you, and comment below. Tell us the moment you stopped feeling alone. We're watching, we're listening, and we read everything. Now, go ahead, gain the courage to check the dark corners before you sleep. Turn off the lights, close your eyes, sleep well, if you can.